So we'll get started. This is the North Central Integrated Pest Management Center Pests in Progress series. Welcome to today's webinar. It's the breeding efforts to curb Cucurbit Downy Mildew. Just to introduce myself, my name is Laura Isles. I'm the co-director of the North Central IPM Center. We run one of 4 regional IPM centers supported by USDA NIFA Crop Protection and Pest Management program. We have a mission to coordinate IPM across our region by sharing and promoting IPM research, extension, and teaching activities. During today's webinar, if you have any questions, there's down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a little box called Q&A. You can go ahead and type any questions in there if you're having any problems. And then at the end of the talk, our speaker will answer those questions. So I'm excited to introduce Edmund Frost. He's from the Commonwealth Seed Growers Project, and we're excited to learn about Cucurbit Downy Mildew. It's certainly a big problem here in our region as well. So Edmund, take it away.
Thank you, Laura. So yeah, my talk today is about the breeding and research work I've done to help control Cucurbit Downy Mildew in our operation. And I've bred a number of varieties that I've been putting out there, so other growers are also using many of these varieties. Today we'll be covering winter squash, cucumbers, and cantaloupe melons. I'll give a short introduction about our operation and sort of a little overview of our program here. So I'm at Twin Oaks Seed Farm in Louisa, Virginia, Central Virginia. I've been managing here for since 2008, and we are a seed production farm. We've grown seeds on contract for various seed companies over the years. And I've also done a good bit of research and breeding work, a lot of that funded by grants from SARE, from OFRF, and some of it unfunded. We are certified organic, and that's an important thing to point out because all the breeding work that we do is in a low input context. We do use some row cover. We have occasionally used some organic approved pyganic spray, but we generally don't even use that. So this is an important piece of, having a lot of disease and pest pressure where we can select for things that work even in that context. Twin Oaks Seed Farm is the main farm for Commonwealth Seed Growers, which is a retail seed company that I manage. So Cucurbit Downy Mildew first really came to my attention a year or two after I had started managing the operation here. This is a early on picture from 2010 of me looking at a badly damaged cucumber seed crop, just really killed by downy mildew and kind of wondering what's going on. So I guess the first part of this process has been identifying this problem and trying to figure out what to do to work on it. So fast forward a few years, and I was starting to do some research and breeding work, or more research and trialing work. So in 2014, I had applied for a SARE grant to do cucumber and winter squash and melon downy mildew focused trials. So these are pictures from those trials, and we're going to be referencing these trials a few times during the presentation. This is a little bit later, the same winter squash trial here, but a little bit later, and you can see that the downy mildew is really impacting the squash in the outer row. So that squash in the outer row is Waltham butternut, and the ones that look more healthy are more tropical, more southern varieties. So the thing that I really wanted to point out here is that there's a lot out there in terms of winter squash that has good downy mildew resistance. It's just not necessarily the typical market varieties that people might be used to. So we took this information, we've got these tropical varieties or southern varieties that work well in terms of downy mildew. We've got a northern variety, Waltham butternut, that really isn't working well. And so my approach with the breeding was to cross those and go from there. And actually, I had already made the cross at this point. And now fast forward to this year. This is South Anna butternut. It's bred from a cross between Seminole pumpkin and Waltham butternut. And I've done, I made the cross in 2011. I've been doing selection for 10 years. Wasn't able to do the intensive selection every single year, but 10 cycles of intensive selection. This is another butternut that I bred, which also has Seminole and Waltham in the background, but it has another tropical pumpkin crossed into that. Go back to this picture here. This is a really good, clear picture of the, how bad downy mildew can be in winter squash, but it's a little bit misleading because the Waltham butternut sets fruit a lot earlier. So in my breeding efforts, I want plants that have really healthy foliage, but I also want them to set fruit in a timely way. So that's one of the challenges with this work. So there's the Baker's Branch butternut, and a little bit about the winter squash selection methods that I've used. Early on, what I was doing is each plant in the breeding trial, I was training separately and evaluating separately. And then in more recent years, I've been letting the vines twine together, but then tracing the fruits back to the vines. And that way you can evaluate on the basis of the whole plant rather than just the fruits. So you can really get a good combination of keeping quality and eating quality and yield in your selections. Other things that we look for is, other things we've been selecting for are yield, concentrated fruit set, lack of fruit rot, good keeping quality. We also do bricks and dry matter tests, and we look at the fruit shape and size. So here's an example of us doing eating quality tests on Baker's Branch butternut. This is the picture on the right. You can see that there's samples of different fruits that we're going to bake and taste test. In the foreground, there's also dry matter testing, and in the plastic bags, that's how we do the bricks testing. You freeze the squash, and then it's easy to get the juice out to do a bricks test. Now on the left here, there's a short video about vine tracing for butternut. And I think we don't have time to play it, but I'd encourage people to go to our website, commonwealthseeds.com, and click on the blog, and you can watch this video about how I do vine tracing for butternut. And this pile here, all these fruits come from the same plant. So that's the goal with that method, is to get all the fruits from each plant together so I can evaluate them as a whole. So just wrapping up the winter squash part, results on the breeding work I've done with winter squash. I've been able to get very good downy mildew resistance, very good eating quality, and I've been really prioritizing eating quality in the selections to the extent that it has potentially, when you have really high bricks and dry matter in a squash, it can impact the yields. So that is something that I'm really continually trying to improve, is the yields, but I'm not willing to sacrifice the eating quality to get there. I'm happy with the keeping quality, and we're continuing to select for concentrated fruit set. But both of these varieties, I think, really work well in our area. I would caution growers very far north. They can be longer season than some others, but I believe that in Iowa it ought to work pretty well. These are a couple other winter squash varieties that I've worked on. These are not the results of crosses. These are populations that I've just been refining and improving. So that's a link to, if you want to read more about the SARE grants. I've actually done several SARE grants with winter squash. the first one was, the first SARE grant was winter squash, cucumbers and melons, and the other ones were mostly just winter squash. So moving on to cucumbers, it's kind of a similar story. I was seeing major problems early on with many of our cucumber crops, just crops dying in the field from downy mildew, and I wanted to figure out what to do about it. And I felt that this was an opportunity to make a good contribution by working on this problem. So the pictures I'm going to show here are actually from a 2018 trial, 2018 cucumber trial that we did with a grant from Organic Farming Research Foundation. And I'm going to go through some comparison slides, and this is just so people get a picture of what we're dealing with here with downy mildew. I'm sure some of you have seen this, but here's a popular standard variety that just isn't able to hardly do anything. Produce a couple misshapen cucumbers and then it dies. Now this is in the context of late planting when downy mildew pressure is high. So here's another variety that also just, will lead to crop failure in our environment. And in contrast, here are a couple of varieties that were bred by Michael Mazurek at Cornell for downy mildew resistance. And so early on in our work, we identified, or I started working with Michael Mazurek, and he gave us this material he'd been working on, and I was really excited to see it and compare it. And most everything else we were trialing wasn't working at all. But here's another one, DMR 401, and this is a standard slicer, which is actually a popular seller for us. This is a picture of the DMR 401. And yeah, so that's still an important variety that I recommend taking a look at. But in addition to that, I started doing my own breeding work. And this is a slide from that same trial of an F3 generation breeding project that I had already started at that point, and it's looking pretty good in the face of the downy mildew. Here's a picture of the 3 parents of that variety. There's a Chinese cucumber, an American pickler, and a pickler or a cucumber from the Philippines. And you can see these parents don't look, they're definitely impacted by downy mildew, but they look better than the Marketmore 76. So moving on from that, just going to talk a little bit about the cucumber selection and breeding methods that I've done. This is a breeding trial from, I believe, 2019. And the basic method here is that each plant gets a flag, and I record notes on the flag and then make selections of the best plants. And I've been doing this for a good number of years. So yeah, basic cucumber selection methods. We plant late to give the plants high downy mildew pressure. Each plant gets a flag. We go through and do harvest of edible fruits, record the yields on the flags, and also record fruit quality notes on the flags. After a couple weeks, we start leaving fruits on the plants so that they will, so we'll be able to save seeds from the standout plants. We also rate the downy mildew pressure on the foliage. And also from this same project, a slicer line emerged. So it's actually turned into 2 varieties. Here's some examples of what the flags look like. You can see the hash marks indicating yields, and you can see some of the notations I take. SW means sweet, GS means good shape. So this is a way to really track plant by plant and hone in on yields and eating quality. And this is Commonwealth pickler here. On the left is 2024, on the right is 2023. And this here is 2024 again. On the left is eating stage, on the right is kind of early seed harvest stage. There's a close-up of the flag again, and then on the right, that's kind of late seed harvest stage. And you can see all the flags, all the pink flags there. That's Commonwealth Pickler, a nice picture of the variety. And then the other variety from that same three-way cross is Southwind Slicer. So just a sort of a review of Southwind Slicer and Commonwealth Pickler. I'm very happy with the downy mildew resistance and the bacterial wilt tolerance we've been able to select for. I'm very happy with the eating quality. And they tend to be pretty resilient in dry conditions and have a good percentage of marketable fruit. They don't tend to throw very many off-shape fruits. Let's see, the plants are long-lasting. They tend towards continual yields rather than concentrated yields. And some downsides, Commonwealth Pickler is late compared to most picklers. So, I'm still doing selections and ongoing stewardship with the variety. So I am going to try to nudge it earlier. Southwind Slicer is lighter in color than a standard American slicer. But I still think it's a handsome cucumber and it's got good flavor. So those are the varieties I've been able to put out there. Let's see. Okay, so now we're to the melon section, and this is going to be a little bit shorter of an overview. In 2014, again, we did winter squash, cucumber, and melon trials with the SARE grant. And this is a picture that has both cucumbers and melons in it. And we're going to go through some comparison photos of some of the melons in that trial. You can see the trifecta looks a good bit better than the Delicious 51 here. There's quite a bit of dead leaves on the Delicious 51. Another comparison, Edisto 47 is looking a good bit better than the Hale's Best Jumbo. And these pictures aren't quite as dramatic as the cucumber pictures with the almost completely dead Marketmore 76 plants. But when you have a melon crop that looks like this Hale's Best Jumbo here, you're not going to get sweet fruits. So it really does have a big impact. And part of why I chose these is that Trifecta and Edisto 47, I've used them together in a breeding project. So I chose them because of their downy mildew resistance and tolerance, and they also both did well with bacterial wilt, which is something that was a pretty serious problem in the early trials that I did. I also like the fruit quality, and I've been selecting for four generations now, and this is the product of this project is not a named variety yet, but I hope to name it and put it out there pretty soon. Here's a picture on the left doing eating quality tests and bricks tests with some of the melons, and on the right you can see there's a row of melons that have flags, and it's kind of like similar to the cucumbers where I can record notes on the flags, and each plant has its own ID. Here's a picture from 2025. Pretty excited about this variety. So if you're interested in these varieties, we have many of them for sale on Commonwealth Seed, commonwealthseeds.com. For seed companies, please contact me. I would love to. We work with several other seed company partners to put some of these varieties out there, and I'd be happy to talk. anyone who's doing research trials, I would love to send you seed to put in the research trials. I'm also happy to talk to people about breeding techniques and about trials and research. So you can contact me for that again at info@commonwealthseeds.com. And lastly, we do carry an open source pledge or statement. It does go with the seeds that I put out there. So we want people to pass that on if they work with these varieties. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and I look forward to hearing your questions.
Great, thank you so much. And again, if you have questions, please type it into the Q&A portion there. We have our first question is, when making selections, how much variability do you see between one plant and another?
A whole lot of variability, especially at the beginning of the project. Just let's say in the butternut. Well, it's interesting. It was actually pretty early on in the butternut selection that I was able to get the good disease resistance into most of the plants. But I kept seeing pretty dramatic variation in fruit quality for a long time.
Okay. And this is more of a personal question. I know how easily cucurbits will cross-pollinate. Like how do you do these I guess mechanically, how do you do this and don't have just cross-pollination going on?
Yeah, so I have several different isolated plots. So I'm able to do, one butternut in one plot and then the other butternut in another plot far enough away that they won't cross. But then within the plot, often, especially so early on in the project, in most of these projects, I was doing some self-pollination of the best plants to sort of hone in on those genetics. But in most of the years ongoing in the project, I've just been doing maternal selection. So they've been able to cross to the other plants in the population.
Okay. Yeah, because we had another question to control the problem of plant-to-plant cross-pollination. So your plot
Yeah,
spacing.
yeah. Again, early on when I really wanted to sort of, early on when you start the project, there's more material in there that isn't good that you want to get out. And so I was doing more self-pollination of the best plants, and this is both with winter squash and cucumbers. But then as a project moved forward, I kind of want a broader, slower approach. I don't want to narrow it too much. So and it's also a good bit easier to just do the maternal selection.
Okay. You mentioned, kind of production. It sounded like selecting for, like you said, concentrated production. Is there different, because I know sometimes growers want to be taking things to the markets over time. What are the trade-offs there?
Yeah. So with the winter squash, I want concentrated fruit set because you don't want fruits that are half ripe when it's getting cold outside. So that's pretty clear. But with the cucumbers, I have not necessarily shied away from the more continual fruit set. That is a trait of those varieties.
Okay. And anyone who needs any certified crop advisors who need CEUs, we have shared that QR code there on the screen. And again, if you have any questions, please continue to type those into the Q&A portion. I will just, as we're approaching kind of the half hour, just say that our next Pest in Progress webinar will be on February 18th. at 12 p.m. Central, 1 p.m. Eastern time, and it's going to be genetic biocontrol of New World screwworm and spotted wing Drosophila. And we'll have Max Scott, who's a professor at North Carolina State University, talk about that. Let's see if any other questions coming in. You mentioned, whether like the cold or thaw things, how many growing degree days, like what would be like too far north where you're not going to get in enough degree days, for example, to like slice or cucumber, like what's the limits there?
Um, for our cucumbers will work pretty far north. People grow them in Maine. And I have family in Minnesota that does well with them. But I think if you grow them in the north, you'll just need to just, they're not going to be a particularly early variety for you, especially the pickler. The slicer is more in line with a standard slicer. Um, and then for the butternut, I've also had good reports from as far north as Minnesota, but they are bred for Virginia, and I recommend people try them, but you know uh, don't try a huge field of them um, until you've tried a little bit.
Mhm.
If you're in the north.
And I think I forget which, maybe the cucumbers you mentioned bacterial wilt tolerance. Are you having to manage bacterial wilt a lot? I know that's another vexing problem.
Yeah, part of why I chose the parent lines was because those ones also did better with bacterial wilt than some of the other ones in the early trials. And then I have definitely also prioritized like plants that don't get bacterial wilt. And
Mhm.
I think that they have uh, some, definitely a better than average ability to handle bacterial wilt.
So I'm not seeing any other questions come in. So Edmund, thank you so much. This was really fascinating. Beautiful pictures. I love your pictures
Thanks.
of the melon. So thank you so much for sharing this information. And again, we'll share out with everyone attending the webinar your contact information after this if they want to follow up with you for anything. So thank you.
Yeah, it's glad to be on here, and I look forward to communicating with people who are interested to know more and to talk about it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll see everyone on February 18th.